the Saturn squares his moon, and the Uranus squares the moon, and Venus and Mercury sextile. So the Venus and Mercury, they're easy aspects, but that allowed him to express himself nicely, pleasantly. Mercury to be able to express his memories or his ideas, third house, moon, and the Venus coming in to be able to be charming and be appreciative. And this was the Mercury and Venus coming in sixth. That was a nice quality. So it's not hard for him to write or see what was beautiful or see what was pleasant. Okay, at the same time, Saturn squared his sun, so squared his moon. So the Saturn caused a restriction. There were restrictions. He didn't get the appreciation he wanted. He had difficulties growing up. He felt it wasn't as nice as he wanted it to be. He wanted to be better. He wanted to be but he would look back and there would be inhibitions around it. Feelings not expressed. But you see, feelings expressed for him are not about emotional, not about gushy, emotional, watery sympathies. They're about being hugged, being touched, having the comforts of life being taken care of. And there would be some restriction around that. There were some difficulties between his dad and his mom. Saturn square the moon. And that would create an inhibition around his feelings. So even though he had these strong feelings of what he liked and what he didn't like, he wouldn't express them. He wasn't listened to. It went into his own interpersonal evaluation world, his own reflective evaluation world. It wasn't, the Saturn wasn't reinforcing it. There were some interesting stories in his life when he first had some synchronicity or alternate layers of understanding when they came in and when his insights started opening up and how they did. It had really visceral, very tactile memories. But at the same time, it implies there's a restriction on them. So it means he didn't go up the way he felt he should. And it could have been better. And his Taurus moon, if it could be better, it's not satisfying to stay where it is. I've got to make it better. I got to improve this. So his memory of his living in the behind the train station with his father and mom in what he would consider substandard environment was part of his drive to make sure he had an education so he could go ahead and be somebody in his life and never have that poverty problem. Okay, primary instinct, but it came out of the inhibition. So when it comes to showing his feelings, he has a caution, a reserve. He's not going to be quick to show his feelings. He'll be defensive or listening or reflective. So his moon in Taurus knows what he likes, but he's reflective around what's happening, whether he's being attention or not. So he's measuring whether you like him or not, whether you're being listened to or you're being distant or not, whether you're respecting his feelings or not. So it's not a good or bad, it's just technically in astrology, it's a difficult aspect, not a good aspect, but it's not a good or bad issue. It's an inhibition factor. It's a restriction and a limitation on his feelings. So, and his feelings were in the house of personal expression. So he wouldn't necessarily have been encouraged to talk that much when he was growing up. Kids should be seen and not heard. And it might have created a polarity between how he related to his mom, which he would probably idealize with the moon in Taurus, versus his dad. Although the Saturn is in his first house, so he would identify to his dad. Both have strong holds, have strong effects. But you can see this restrictive factor coming on the moon in Taurus in the third house. So he has the charm, he has the talent, but he's not idealized or necessarily respected for it. He feels he's not good enough, feels insecure. He has to work harder to get it. So he worked really hard to get his PhD so he could get a position in the academy, make money, take care. He's married a well-off woman, so it doubly took care of things. So as his career began to build up in his writings, his need to write could also be said with that moon in the third house. Okay. Now, by the feeling of inhibited, do I have enough to say? I've done it, the kind of an experience that's right. That Saturn is there, just a cautious side to him. I think about this now. A lot of young words are it's not how people write today. This was another time, and people would write. This was before TV. So people would write long words. They're great words that mean 4 or 5 things, and they mean all 5, and they add the words together, and they make this long sentence that has multiple meanings, and you read it once and you're sure you understand it, then you read it again and you hear it totally differently, and you go, wow, it forces you to think deeper. That was the way of thinking back in those days, and he grew up through that. But the need to get his degree and to get established, that was part of his practical consideration. But then he has Uranus in the 7th squaring his moon. So even though there's a concern about it, he also has an anxiety. There's an anxiety level here. And the Uranus comes in as the strongest aspect. It's the closest and the strongest here. The Uranus comes in and squares the moon and creates this tremendous anxiety of losing what has. I'm not feeling secure. I'm not being appreciated no matter what. I'm not fitting in. This isn't good enough. It's almost anything he has, he's going to worry about, and it comes directly from relationships. Do I have enough for a relationship? Is that going to be there? Is this going to be? Do I like this? Am I like them? And not like. So he has a half insecure, and anxious, and a depressed, instinctive nature. His feelings are both anxiety-ridden, high-strung, unstable, and defensive about being inhibited, not having enough, and it's unstable. It could get worse. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen? He's not juggling with it. It's not immutable. There's a practical words. I can't live like this. It's against the nature of his natural moon to have abundance, have comfortable things, be appreciated, be liked, be listened to. So his attitudes and his sign and house position, you really see the strength. In his attitudes, you see, he didn't get it easy. There were disruptions, there were anxieties, there were shocks, there were repressions, there were contradictory energies coming in, affecting his feelings and his stability. And this was kind of the roots of his understanding and learning, of his expressing his depth. He could see these things, he could feel these things. He would certainly instinctively feel if someone was too inhibited or conserved. He would instinctively feel if someone was too anxious. But he had both, and he's trying to maintain a stable practice, a stable feeling, stable life. Now, on top of this, there's another aspect. There's the aspect of the moon conjunct Pluto. It's beside each other, so you don't see it drawn on the chart, but you see them beside each other, and they're only 8 degrees apart. So the moon is a 10-degree orb. So the moon to Pluto is another it's the harshest aspect, the outermost planet, the innermost planet. It's a conjunction, so there's a fear and a power struggle on that moon. There's a fear of feeling secure, or a fear of not being secure enough, a fear of not having things, or being cut off and never getting them, a fear of losing, a fear of shock, a fear of things happening. There's great fear of not being expressed. And that means his personal life, his feelings, his mother, his moods, his feelings were very controlled. And he would learn how to control things to get what he wanted, or they would be controlled and he wouldn't get what he wanted. There was a power struggle around his feelings, which forced him to ask really deep and profound questions. So it's interesting. It's just an interesting insight. It's like we're on a nerve here. It's what when going through these things, he keeps talking, going deeper and deeper and deeper. In fact, his biography was called Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. It's a moon reflection on his life and what was important and what wasn't. It's so astrological, so lunar. But you have to understand this practical need to be appreciated, to be liked, and a sensitivity. I have to control things to have the money I have. I can't be without. I can't do without. I can't be broke. I can't. There's a fear of close. There's almost a fear of being close. A need to share, a need to express oneself, but a fear of being close. Now that's really interesting. You have somebody that express himself right deeply, profoundly. The Pluto, the moon in the 3rd house is going to add this harsh analysis of what's valuable, what's not valuable, what's true around feelings, what's not true, what's a fear, what's a phobia, what's an anxiety, what's a depression. All of these things are based that he's working through within himself. As he does, he can see how they would apply to others. So he can express the most difficult things. He would experience these fears and these blocks. But it would come out in his Taurus moon as a need. I still need to have a certain security. I still need to have a certain stability. If I need to have a degree, so I'm not going to be poor, I need to be able to have the right foundations, or a place where I can live, so I can write, and so on a personal level, he probably would be very security conscious around family and home, how his kids would be. He would be very controlling and afraid of instabilities in it. I don't know that much about his life or that part of his life with his kids. But certainly he would not be an easy person to live with. He had his way. He's predictable. You know exactly how it is. And if he's with someone, they'd have to adapt or go along with it because they couldn't be trying to change him. But you can see the storm of the Moon-Pluto psychoanalysis, the deep reflections on fear, on blocks, on power, and the ability to blow up, to turn something to see something that wasn't love into a hate, or to turn attraction into turn a great repulsion. How do you transform this to get peace again, to get appreciation? These power struggles, that's in the Pluto to the Moon. And the Uranus is disrupting it, the Saturn's trying to caution it, and there's all these pressures, 3 other planets, all directly pivoted on his most personal planet, on his feelings, on his moons, which fortunately are not, people are born now with all the planets in Capricorn and stuff, they're getting these things with, in Cancer, very emotional or rational. This is not emotional rational, this is practical emotion, this is tactile, this is appreciation of it being liked, not being like, being wanted, not being wanted, wanting something, not wanting something, certainly not wanting to be poor, not wanting to be ignorant, not wanting to be not listened to, and being able to see when someone's not living right or living good or living good. He could see they're not living properly. This is a fault. He would see those things. He would see them in himself. He would be almost tortured by them in himself. But he has an instinctive tendency with this Moon Pluto to control his home, his feelings, environments, and to perhaps isolate himself so that he could write. This really, I don't know so much in his early how this worked, but I know in his later years he just locked himself away in a tower and wrote from a tower and lived in the tower, and hardly came out of his tower, which he had built for this purpose, so he could live in his own isolation without being disturbed by others. So you can see if he's with a client that liked them or was generally had trouble, so he would try and see how it could help them. But if they didn't like him or he would have strong reactions to negative energy, powerful reactions to negative energy. Really, very different process, a dynamic than Freud would have had in running into carsons or confrontations and analyzing it. 2 different takes on it. But you can see his personal processing. But you can see the practical determination. I need to know. I need the moon to know, to learn, to understand, to express this. It's the 3rd house, to talk about things, to communicate my fears. So the idea of psychoanalysis and talking one's fears to be able to work through them, that's so close to this. Moon Pluto, 3rd house in Taurus, squared by Saturn, squared by Uranus. Wow. So he could either be going very politely and nicely with the Venus Mercury sextiling his moon, but the minute something difficult would happen, any threat, any confrontation, any challenge, he would go really deep, really fast, almost too fast. So I'd have 2 different sides of what was pleasant and what was harsh to deal. So he might have a seesaw going between, this is where I live and where things are, this is how I work, and this is how when I'm writing out how I'm counseling, between his counseling when he had to deal with in people's problems and coming home to have his, you could have this as 2 different worlds from the seesaw type and from his moon phase. But the moon itself was trying to establish itself and be stable and deal with these things and express these things. And he would take them on, he would see them, he would certainly feel them, what was right or what wasn't right. And what wasn't right would never be acceptable to him. So he'd be working to try and express, to change it, get rid of that demon, get rid of that negative emotion.